dollars of net revs. So it varies, but that's another metric that people.
Okay, and I think, I would say personally also very much experienced that, which is, the scale up phase is definitely one where you're growing. I think at Andela back then, years ago, it was about 100% year over year growth, which stretches you in many ways. And then, the idea is that after you've been around for a while, you start to reduce that growth percentage to maybe 70, then to 50, and maybe you stick around the 30-ish long term.
Yeah, then you worry, right? If it starts to get a little bit taper, a bit too low. So that's what I mean, but you never really stop growing or scaling in that.
So I guess let's jump into more tactical. So I think we've developed context now. People now know here. Okay, what would make your company look to an external investor or as a scaling company, right? I think Eloho said if you're doing about $1 million of revenue, if you're growing 20+% year over year, that puts you within the general target. And of course, you don't wake up in the morning and start doing $1 million of revenue, so there's a growth path to get there. But I think that's at the point in which people start to look at you as, okay, this company is scaling. And I think the things that drive success at that point then become very different from what drives success when you're just starting off. And so I think I would say, for me, scaling, you've probably figured out your product market fit at that point. You probably know what your customers want. You've gotten a lot of feedback. You've actually tested and deployed, and you're getting traction, which means you're growing your sales. It means you're then beginning to really ramp up on sales, which means you also have to begin to ramp up on operations. What are some of the principles that you have from watching companies go through that phase? Are there some ideal ways in which companies have been able to scale? Are there some pathways that drive more success or ones that don't?
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess in a short version of that, what would you say are the key principles?
So I guess the first principle is a little bit of a counter principle in that, I spent, as you might imagine, I spent a lot of my time talking to entrepreneurs, right? Different kinds, different company sizes, different markets. And one common thread that I have found, I think that's also why, Endeavor is built the way it is, right? Which is that we're not often programmatic in the way that we approach some of this support. Is that there really are ultimately no playbooks, right? And these entrepreneurs will tell you. It's funny, I was on the phone yesterday, an illustration with an entrepreneur from Turkey who wants to expand into Nigeria. Nigeria will be his 26th market.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I guess it's really interesting digital marketing business that he'd like to deploy in Africa with Nigeria as his first market. And he was saying to us, so can you guys help me with my market entry? And that's what we do, right? And that's what we hope that other Endeavor offices will do for Nigerian entrepreneurs expanding into their own markets. So I said, yeah, sure. And then I said, but before we carry on, let me just say this one thing. I don't believe in playbooks. There are no playbooks. I've done this 25 times in 25 different countries, and there are no playbooks. I had to get into it. And he says, I personally go to every single market. In the last 8 years, I've lived varying degrees of time in 18 different markets. Because it was a strategic market, I needed to go there. I needed to learn the market, and the only way to do it was to immerse myself and to talk to my potential customers. So I guess first principle is really that what works in one market doesn't necessarily, or what works for one sort of segment, one particular problem, doesn't necessarily apply one for one or across everything else, right? Yeah. And I think that just sort of having that, what we found is that the entrepreneurs that tend to do product expansion and product extension and new market pretty well and things like that are the ones who just sort of take a mindset that says, I'm always learning, right? So I'm learning about this customer, I'm learning about this product, and I'm not taking any of it for granted. So I think that's kind of the first principle. The truth is, there are a bunch of inflection points that companies will face. And I personally think about those as sort of having three different, as you reach that sort of, for example, Andela, as you're on that journey, I categorize them into three different buckets in terms of things that entrepreneurs should watch for, right? And how they think about the principles around how to then deal with those three different buckets. The first is there'll be something around people and culture. There'll be something around, you go from usually about 7 to 10 employees is where you hit your inflection point, where they're the first tension points. And the reason for that is the organization is becoming more complex. People are complex beings, relationships are complex, and you start to have to clarify various things at that stage. You hit it again at about 20, 25 people, you hit it again at about 50, you hit it again at about 100, and then you hit it at 500. Where you'll find that the things that used to work, well, I mean, these numbers are rough, right? But you find that the things that used to work in terms of how you manage your people, in terms that used to work in terms of how you all communicate and work well as a team, right? And things that used to work in terms of how you reward performance and all of those things, you kind of need to revisit them. Don't take anything for granted. Take a step back and say, well, X, Y, Z is the evidence that this isn't working as well as it used to, and A, B, C are the 2 or 3 things that we could potentially do to try and address that. I also find the second bucket for me is something around product and technology. And that usually is 2 things. So on the tech side, it's probably like, you're growing so quickly, right, that your tech always kind of has to keep up, and you'll meet a bunch of inflection points there. On the product side, it is usually things like you started out with a particular feature set, for example, and you knew that these were the customers that we were trying to address with that. But then as you sort of deepen further into, further along that curve of trying to serve those customers, they know your brand, they know your product, they're using it, they like it, right? But the job that they need to be, the job that they are now looking for your product or your service or the value they're looking to get for it also evolves, right? So you can't keep doing absolutely the same stuff that you did with those customers a year ago when they were only committing, I don't know, 1,000 naira a month to your product, to a year later where their commitment is now 3,000 naira a month and the value that they're looking to get from you is a little bit different. And that in and of itself. And it becomes more complex because you then have multiple cohorts of customers. You have some customers that started with you a week ago. And in terms of how they engage with your product, they're behaving like the customers that were there a year ago. Once who have been with you for a year, the value they're looking for from your product has shifted. And you're having to sort of manage that again as a bunch of different inflection points.
Fantastic.
The third one, sorry, before I let you, the third one for me is around actually the leadership. And of course, at the core of that is the entrepreneurs themselves, right? I think, again, there are extremes. There are extreme narratives around where you get to a point where you have to know when to step away from your company. I don't know about all of that. I suppose it must be true. But I think more organically, what happens is that the entrepreneurs themselves start to say, okay, I have much greater clarity around what I do well. I should have much greater clarity around what I do well, around how I lead, and how that impacts or is in the best interest of my team, my company, etc. You start to find again that entrepreneurs start to differentiate themselves by the ones who will then say and actively go out of their way to hire people that are more experienced and smarter than they are, right? And do things like proactively look for ways to grow even in their own leadership. It's at these points that you start to see leadership teams diverge a little bit. So you might see one co-founder leave because, the organization is becoming more and more complex. We have to make tougher and tougher decisions, and we can't do some of these decisions by consensus because we started doing this thing together 18 months ago. So I think those are the kinds of 3 sort of buckets of inflection points that we see that scale-ups start to face. And depending on, of course, the complexity in the business and things like that, they manifest.
I think that's fantastic. And I would say that very much echoes my experience. You talk about things. I think for a lot of people, a startup is really a series of product iterations, right? Scaling a startup, because like Eloho said, what your customer wants today and the customers you get today are not necessarily going to have the exact same needs as the customers you get tomorrow. Like the early movers may not have the exact same needs as those who come in later. So you're really constantly iterating your product, and you might find that during your scaling, the product you started with actually looks very different from the products you end up with after you've made a bunch of iterations. Now, sometimes you might actually have the same exact product. Sometimes you may have enough tweaks that you realize that it's actually significantly different. But that's something to pay attention to.
And sometimes you have different different features that mean that the experience of one customer who's engaging with you, initially looks a little bit different to the guy or girl who has been using your product for a year and has started to pick, apply different feature sets and feature combinations and things like that.
So, second being the size, which is, I personally, like, as soon as we hit 150 people, I think we went through the previous ones you described, but once we hit 150 people, I realized I stopped knowing people's names. That was the beginning of it. You can't just expect to have a meeting and you tell everyone what's going on and then everyone understands. Your communication has to change. And the way in which you create a mechanism to ensure everyone's on the same page and everyone's rowing in the same direction really fundamentally changes. And I think it's actually a proven theory that communities of greater than 150 are much harder to manage because that's where human beings actually begin to break down in terms of relationships. I think the last one is hiring, which is extremely critical, like you said, which is, you have to start hiring people that are better than you and smarter than you on particular topics. Your finance person should know more about finance than you. The marketing person should know more about marketing than you. So I think those are absolutely critical drivers. And like you said, the playbooks are there, or there's no playbook rather. There are concepts and theories and frameworks. We have to adapt each one as you scale your business. So I know we're beginning to run out of time. We only have about 2 minutes left. Let me ask you a question that I hope you can give me a 1 minute fire response. A lot of people will say, okay, this is all nice and great and fantastic. I get it. I'm taking some notes. But you know what? 2020 presented to us a challenge that nobody could ever foresee.
Yeah.
COVID. How does all this stuff work in a period where we're all being decimated, right? So I guess the question for you is, are there any specific lessons that you've learned from the most resilient entrepreneurs who have navigated these current times that you think people should adopt as they think about their businesses?
Wow, I think that's a great question. So I think for me, one thing that I've seen and I've sort of most admired in some of our entrepreneurs in Nigeria and elsewhere, right? So the advantage that we have at Endeavor is being able to see this play out across 13 different markets. The most resilient entrepreneurs and the ones that seem to have navigated, because everybody's sort of at different stages of sort of how they deal with all of this, right? Have been, I would say, the guys and the girls that have sort of, they took all the advice, right? But for them, it was always very clear that I'm gonna be making a bunch of decisions in an imperfect environment. So I'll take all of the advice. I will mix it up in my little elixir of kind of, what my business does and how I want to do it. And I will make a bunch of very definitive decisions. I'll also sort of narrow my scope of decision, right? I'll have fewer people around me that make a bunch of decisions with me. And I'll have 2, 3, 4 critical things that matter the most to us over the next 12 months. And that's where we'll spend our focus all our time. Okay. I've also found that those guys and girls have had a level of, they've been quite circumspect. Look, there's a bunch of stuff that we'll get right here. There's a bunch of stuff that we'll get wrong here. But the most important thing is that we'll always just, with the information we have in front of us, make the best decisions that we can. That's been the defining feature for us.
Focus, I think is the word of the day. Hello, thank you. It's been a pleasure hosting this Fireside Chat. Thank you for being here and sharing your insights. You managed to pull me out of my sabbatical to do this, so I feel like I'm being reborn. I said Wale has joined us.
Thank you guys so much. And that my question, I still want Seni, I want you to take that question on you understand you're part of this as well, and which is at the beginning stage, what do you think are the common mistakes some founders and startups are actually they make at the beginning stage? You as a venture builder, what do you think?
Yes,
thank you so much. I'm just here to make sure I run this.
Yes, so I'm going to give my experience both from building an airline from scratch, where we basically try to copy elements of what we've seen elsewhere, but also innovate, and also of course at Andela, where we had to scale that business. Something I've seen in every single case is a lot of entrepreneurs focus so much on the product, right? Maybe you're an engineer, or maybe you're someone that's into marketing or whatever it is, but we focus so much on the product itself. I'm going to build this really amazing product that has all these amazing features, and we don't spend enough time talking to real customers that want to buy the product and getting feedback from them. I've seen this, with companies I've invested in. I've seen this in companies I've advised. It is a common problem where the person is focusing just so much on the product and the thing they're building that they don't really understand as well as they should what the customer is going to do with that thing, how the customer is going to use it, and whether or not the customer is willing to pay for it. And so I would say for every entrepreneur, every aspiring entrepreneur, at the very early stages of you forming your idea and coming up with a product or service, you want to be in the room with your customers, speaking to them, even showing them samples if possible. I mean, I was selling airline seats before we had an airline, right? I was going to Total, going to Shell, going to Mobil, going to everyone else saying, look, we have this airline, we have some seats, you want to buy. And they were like, where's the airline? I'm like, well, it's not there yet. We're trying to get your feedback as we build it. And you might get people saying that I'm not interested, but they'll tell you why they're not interested.
Yeah.
when they tell you why they're not interested, you take that and you turn that into a feature that you come back to them later on and offer. And so yes, I was able to sell to pretty much all the major oil and gas companies, law firms, embassies, all that, by having met with them, gotten their feedback, and then incorporated that into the product.
Okay. So feedback is important. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you, Seni. Thank you. We really appreciate your time and we appreciate your contribution. Hi, hello. Nice to meet you.
Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. So you guys can go to the backstage now.
Okay.
Okay. So thank you guys for attending. Thank you. So what we want to do now, we have just 2 to 3 minutes. If you have a comment or question, just go to the Q&A, press it. I will invite you to stage to just, if you have a question, raise your hand so I can invite you to stage now. So if you have a question or a comment, a comment because the speakers are not here, please raise your hand. I will invite you. Sorry, I'm trying to, okay. Yes. I can see I've invited someone. So you will see the invitation response. Just join the panel. Hello, can you hear me? Oh. Thank you. Just go to the panel. If you're there, just the Q&A button is there. Just raise your hand. Then, okay. I can see hands coming in. Benjamin. Yes. Benjamin should be joining us now. Check your internet. Okay.
Hello.
I think I will invite you. Oh, okay.
Hi.
Okay, Benjamin, you're live.
Yes. Hello. Thank you very much for this platform.
Thank you.
It's been great. It's been quite an experience. So to save time, I'm going to go straight to my question.
Okay.
It's more
at this stage, you should be comment because I'm not the speaker
comment
from the experience so far. But you can you can ask your question. I'll be happy to.
Okay, cool. So it's about more of the founder's dilemma, right? When it comes to hiring is very critical, like Seni Sulyman said. So looking at the period we are in right now, this is coronavirus. Capital is very much constrained. Founders are quite helpless and quite unsure how the business is going to continue. How do you suggest we go through this path of offering equity? How viable is it? Especially when you're working, it's a technology company. You're working in a technology company, and you want to have a CTO, right? How do we go about the stock option scenario?
For me, I always tell people, no matter who you are, no matter the equity of the company doesn't mean anything. So you still have to pay people at the beginning, except you want them to have something they focused on and they're doing your job on the side. So your job as a founder is still to look for that money. At the beginning, try and pay people so they can concentrate. You don't need to pay them their market value, but at this stage, just pay them something that they will use to keep body and soul together. That's really important. And also, you can give them something that they need to be part of the company that will make them feel like they're part of the company and contribute to the company. So equity at the beginning, trust me, a lot of people try to give equity at the beginning, but people still need to survive. So you need to make sure you need to make sure you give them something, a take home as well at the end of the month. Everybody have bills to pay no matter what. So that's my own take on that. I hope that's enough. And you can go to community. You can ask some of these questions on community.techpoint.africa. We have a lot of amazing people there that will also give their input. I think this question has been asked on the community as well. There are a lot of feedback on it. Thank you. So I'm inviting Joy now. Joy, if you're listening, you should see a button on your screen. So, okay. So, okay. While we wait for Joy, let's see if we can see someone, pick someone else. Aptali. Just for the people I'm inviting, just go to your screen. You will see the button. There's a button that will allow you to join me on stage. And with that, I think we need to join the next session. So the next session is starting now. We are having, oh, okay. I
Hi,
I
I'm
think
not Ruchi here.
yeah, not Richie. You have 30 seconds because we have to go for the next session now.
30 seconds, okay. I just
Yeah.
want to appreciate the guys for, I guess I'll have to drop my comments at the community
Okay.
Techpoint. So actually a question, but appreciations for what it's actually a very engaging session. And thank you, Techpoints, for all right? Thanks.
Thanks, man. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye. So you can just exit the stage now.
How do I do that?
Don't worry, I can disconnect you.
Okay, please do.
I'm looking for, so I disconnect you. Okay, so on next now we have we are going for the next panel session. Where is it? Oh, okay. We are still on the path to scale, and this is the panelist session. We are having Oluwatosin Olais the founder of Money Africa, moderating this session. We have Enet Obi, the head of sales at Flutter Wave, and Amaldu Dafe, CEO and founder of Gebeya from Ethiopia. So, guys, all you need to do now is go to this next session. You will see a panel, path to scale, it's on your right. It's on your right. Just click stage, then join the stage. So I will see you there now. We will see. And this conference is brought to you by Patricia. It's brought to you by Techpoint, sponsored by Patricia.com. We have Patricia.com and all other partners. Thank you, guys. We'll see you at the next stage. And don't forget, to get a better experience of this conference, use desktop version. If you are on mobile, desktop version. Please don't forget to always like and to encourage our speakers. So see you at the next stage. Bye-bye, guys.